Hello everyone, and welcome to the third and final episode of a mini-series about the surface-level operations of three specific attractions in Disneyland's Tomorrowland, those being Autopia, Monorail, and Star Tours. Last time we covered Autopia, so in this video I will be going over the Monorail and just some of the basic knowledge that repeat visitors may notice on how they do things, and going into a little bit of detail on what they do as well as why they do it. Please know I will only be covering these three attractions mentioned, and for this video specifically, we'll be covering the Disneyland version of the Monorail. This video will also have timestamps, so if anyone wants to skip to something specific, feel free to use them, as this video will be all over the place. Now, before we get started, I would like to make a legal disclaimer for this video series. This video is intended solely for entertainment purposes, as information may not be completely accurate, as rules and regulations change every day at the park. Its purpose is to provide insight into surface level operations of these attractions for those seeking information. It is important to clarify that this content is not endorsed nor officially recognized by the Walt Disney Company. It is imperative to emphasize that the creation of this video series is a personal endeavor and conducted outside any professional responsibilities within the company. There exists no formal association between this video series and the Walt Disney Company. Furthermore, it is crucial to acknowledge that the information presented in this video represents my own perspectives and comprehension of the attractions based on my own experience and observations. It is independent of any official stance held by the company. This includes any potential future alterations that may occur after the release of this video. Your understanding and consideration in this matter is greatly appreciated. Thank you and enjoy the video. What is the monorail? Well, it's a monorail. It's a transportation type attraction, a futuristic looking train that rides along one single rail that is roughly 2 to 3 dozen feet, or roughly 1 dozen meters, off the ground. It takes passengers on a roughly 2.5 mile journey, or roughly 4 kilometers, to the downtown Disney Station and back to the Tomorrowland station, which takes roughly about 12 to 15 minutes per trip. The Disneyland Monorail was the first daily operating monorail system on the Western Hemisphere and opened on June 14, 1959, with one of the first big additions to the park. The current train models were introduced roughly in the middle of 2008. While the monorail beam has stayed the same, the trains have changed over the past 65 years of its operation. The current train model, as of making this video, is the Mark 7s, and this video will be focusing on those trains specifically. It is also worth noting that the monorail at Disneyland is different than the Disney World counterpart and the other Disney parks with one operating. Where is the monorail? Well, the monorail is a very large attraction, so you'll see it pretty much running everywhere in the park. Oh, you mean where can you board it? Well, there are 2 stations you can hop onto it. The first station is the Tomorrowland station, right above the submarine attraction. Its entrance is located right in between the submarine's exit and the bustling cars of the Autopia attraction's exit area. The entrance is not at Autopia's exit and is a common mistake, as Autopia's exit sign isn't very clear for those unaware. The second station and only other stop is the downtown Disney Station. It's located directly in front of the Lego store and right next to the Star Wars trading post, which used to be the Rainforest Cafe. It's also worth noting that at the time of filming this, there is heavy construction in the area, and while I don't expect the station to move anytime soon, the landmarks or buildings around the station may be different depending on when you watch this video. Just look for the big gates and the big blue station with the main entrance cast members standing at some turnstiles. It's really hard to miss. Why ride the monorail? Well, as mentioned before, it's great for transporting those looking to get from point A to point B. It's especially useful for those staying at the Disneyland Hotel, as the downtown Disney Station is close by and can get passengers inside the Disneyland Park really quickly. This is if the monorail is available, of course. The monorail is considered an attraction and not transportation, and attractions are subject to availability. Please check the Disneyland app for its availability before making your way to either station. I will be covering expected downtimes for this attraction later in the video. It's also a great way to see some of the views of the parks, or as they say, a bird's eye view of some scenic views. If you end up taking the round trip from Tomorrowland, you'll hear some interesting facts or some things to do while on its ride through aboard its onboard audio system. I will be covering the ride path in just a moment. While you do get some great views, it's imperative to know that some common misconceptions that get asked to cast members all the time. Common misconceptions. There are many common misconceptions that guests ask cast members all the time, and more will be mentioned in the video, but I feel like I should get this out of the way before going into more detail. The monorail only has 2 stops: the Tomorrowland station, where you can board for a round trip, and the downtown Disney Station. The monorail does not stop anywhere else. It does not stop anywhere in California Adventure. It goes straight through that park, but does not stop there. That would also cause another level of headaches for non-park hopping guests, as the monorail is considered an attraction at Disneyland and not Disney's California Adventure. It also does not stop at Galaxy's Edge either. Do not listen to the TikTok videos, no matter how convincing they may sound. It's also worth noting that it does not stop in any of the other lands either. Some guests get the monorail confused with the railroad. Side note, the railroad does have 4 stops: Main Street, New Orleans, Toontown, and Tomorrowland. Another common misconception is that you can ride it all day. This is not the case, as while it's like other attractions. When you return to the original station, you must exit out, that way other passengers can have a turn to ride as well. Granted, this can also depend on the business of the Tomorrowland station as well as the cast member's choice. I do not speak for them, so please know that you probably have to get out once you get to the Tomorrowland station. The last one is that there is AC on the monorail, so it's good to escape the heat. Well, wrong again, as the Mark 7 monorails do not have air conditioning in the regular cabins, so it's not a great way to beat the heat. It's worth noting that the more people in your cabin, the hotter it'll be, as that's how thermodynamics work or something. The monorails also do shut down for excessive heat, but I will cover that later in the video. Now let's talk about the ride path, the 2.5 mile loop. You may be asking, hey wait, you're doing this out of order compared to your last 2 episodes. Well, I must talk about the trains and the station first for everything else to make sense. Trust me, it'll make sense in a moment. For this attraction's loop, it starts and ends at the Tomorrowland station. Leaving the station, it exits out of Tomorrowland and drives along Harbor Boulevard. It then enters DCA, cruising by some backstage buildings. Then it passes right above the Monsters Inc. attraction and passes over some buildings for Buena Vista Street. It then flies right over Soarin' and passes through the Grand Californian Hotel and Spa. After that, it hovers along some buildings at the end of Downtown Disney and makes its way to a temporary stop at the Downtown Disney Station. Passengers who want to get off can now exit the train, and the passengers at the Downtown Disney Station can board, depending on space availability of course, and make its way back to Tomorrowland. It then exits the Downtown Disney Station and drives over Magic Way, passing by Tortilla Joe's and Splitsville as it cruises by the show building for Indiana Jones and the parking lot for the tram loading and unloading area. It then shoots over the Esplanade, where the 2 main entrances for Disneyland and DCA are. It then passes by some backstage buildings, as well as that busing area for those coming in on Harbor Boulevard side. After this, it makes its way back to Disneyland by going high and sliding down above the Autopia attraction. It then soars over the Submarine Lagoon and gets a good look at the Autopia and the Matterhorn. It then dips down and slowly goes up for one final look at the Tomorrowland station. It then rides above the railroad, passing through some backstage area where the monorails and steam trains are stowed when not in use. It then makes a turn by Small World and rides towards the Matterhorn, passing very closely by the man-made mountain. And then slowly glides back to the Tomorrowland station while riding along the old abandoned Rocket Rods track as it slowly comes to a stop, completing its loop as it stops in Tomorrowland for everybody to exit and repeat the loop once more. As you can see, this is the ride path and why I wanted to cover some misconceptions on where it stops first. Now that this should all make sense, let's move on to some things that you should know before boarding the trains. Know this stuff before boarding. The monorail is like any other attraction at the Disneyland Resort and follows the same rules as every other attraction. There are a few differences from the previous 2 attractions I mentioned in the other videos, and we'll get into those right now. First of all, the monorail does not have a height requirement. Anyone and everyone can ride these trains. The whole family from baby sister to great grandpa. That's pretty neat, right? This is also one of the few attractions that does allow lap sitting. This meaning for children, of course. I feel like I have to say this is for smaller children because, reasons. Also worth noting, while this attraction does not have a height requirement, per Disney's child supervision policy, children under the age of 7 must be accompanied by someone by the age of 14 or older to experience the attractions. Any child 7 or older can ride alone. Please keep in mind that the cast members are not responsible for your children and they cannot take responsibility for them. So basically, parents, make sure you have your children inside the same cabin as you. Next, this attraction does not have a lightning lane, as it doesn't really need it. Plus, since this is a transportation type attraction, it would be pretty complicated. Yes, technically you can redeem a lightning lane redemption here, i.e. from another attraction breaking down, but I do not recommend it as it does not guarantee immediate boarding, as the trains are not always in the station. On top of that, it's just pointless to use it at this attraction as it usually has a 5-minute wait. This attraction is also ADA compliant, so anyone using a wheelchair, electric scooter, or etc. can ride. This is so much so that there's a specific cabin on the train for the parties utilizing those wheelchairs, but I will cover that later in the video. Lastly, strollers are allowed on the monorail, but that'll be the next topic. Strollers. Yes, this is one of the few attractions that lets you take strollers onto the ride with you. There are a few rules though when it comes to boarding with strollers. First of all, strollers must be folded before boarding. If they cannot fold, they cannot be accommodated onto the monorails. This is also noting the strollers that cannot fold, such as the rental ones from Disney themselves. At the time of recording, they are red with Mickey and Minnie Mouse on them. These are just one big plastic chassis, and they cannot physically fold. Unless of course you're the Hulk, but they'll probably be broken after that point. This also goes for strollers that are filled to the brim with stuff and are as heavy as a battering ram. Honestly, just be quicker to walk to wherever you're going rather than taking everything out. That is, if you can. The only exception to this rule is if your stroller has a colored tag issued by Disney that indicates that your stroller needs to be utilized as a wheelchair. These are not given out by Monorail cast members, and see guest relations for more details on this. Basically, if you're taking the monorail and have a stroller, please try to have a simple folding stroller. An umbrella stroller or one that can fold with one simple pull are probably the best for this scenario. This is also useful for trams that transport guests to and from the parking structure, as they are required to fold up their strollers before boarding. Basically, please know your stroller and how it folds before coming into the park. There are some strollers that are pretty much limos and need to be taken apart into multiple pieces for it to be folded. These are the strollers that I'm referencing to, if you're wondering. Wagon strollers are also another complicated thing. Depending on the size, some are not even allowed into the park unless approved by security. These are also a pain to fold, and I would not recommend bringing these onto the monorail unless you fit in that special exception mentioned earlier. Bigger strollers are also worth noting, that if your stroller is as big as a minivan, it's probably not getting through those doors, even if they can fold, though they probably can't go on because they can't fit through the door. Speaking of bigger strollers, it's also worth mentioning that if you do have a big old stroller, it's taking up more room, which means less passengers can sit near you. This may sound like a good thing for you, but it's just about being courteous to your fellow passengers. It's understandable if you have a big old stroller, but just don't be a jerk about it, and try to make sure you are being courteous to those other people trying to enjoy their day. This also means less leg room for you, as the cabins are pretty small and not a lot of wiggle room if you got a stroller the size of Texas. Last thing about big strollers, or any of them for that matter, is that getting out of the cabin can cause one of the panels of the train to get bumped off. This is just being courteous to the monorail and maintenance cast members. If the door panel falls off, it causes a delay for them to fix it, and meaning it takes longer for them to send out the trains. Speaking of delays for the trains, is strollers can cause delays. There are two ways for strollers to cause delays. First is not folding up your stroller and just putting it in the train like you don't care. The trains will not go anywhere until it's folded. It's unsafe to have your stroller unfolded, especially with someone in it, as it may come unlocked and bounce around the train and might end up hurting someone. It's also a safety rule, and you disregarding it is not only reckless but disrespectful. The cast members cannot send the train until your stroller is folded, and you disregarding that rule means the train won't move, which means you're holding up their operations and making a longer wait for everyone else. So don't be that passenger, please. Secondly, taking forever to fold or unfold your stroller before getting in or after getting out. The trains cannot go anywhere until the platform is clear, and taking forever to fold your stroller means the train just sits there until it is folded up. This also goes for unfolding it out on the platform while they're waiting to send it. Try to be aware of your surroundings, and if you need a minute to unfold your stroller, ask if you can move off to the side behind one of the gates so they can continue their operations. Just being unaware of your surroundings and taking your sweet time to fold or unfold your stroller is just rude to everyone, so again, don't be that passenger, please. One last thing about strollers is more of a courteous thing. If you're doing a round trip from Tomorrowland, just leave your stroller in Tomorrowland. Park it with the other strollers in front of the submarine attraction. I promise it's not going to go anywhere. It's pointless to take your stroller on a round trip since you're coming back to the same spot anyway. You wouldn't take your stroller onto another ride like Autopia Star Tours just because it's coming back to the same place, would you? So why do it at the monorail? Yes, I also know that you can't bring your strollers into those rides, but it just kind of goes without saying. On top of that, if you were to take your stroller on a round trip, it just means less room for passengers getting on at downtown Disney, and is especially rude during those peak hours for the monorail. I'm not saying that you can't bring your stroller on if you're doing a round trip. I am just saying that it is courteous to not bring your stroller on when doing a round trip. It means more leg room for you and more space for other passengers getting on at the downtown station. It's just the courteous thing to do. The monorails. Let's talk about the monorails themselves. This is the thing that you'll be riding in, so obviously it's important to discuss. On a normal operation, they can run up to 2 trains at a time. They have monorail blue, orange, and red. At the time of recording, they are running both the blue and orange train. The blue train also has its 100-year wrap to celebrate the company's 100th anniversary. When 2 trains are in operation, they roughly come every 5 minutes. When it's 1 train operation, it comes around every 15 minutes. I will get into more details about both 2 train and 1 train operations later in the video. An important note is that the Disneyland Monorails are driven by a pilot or a monorail cast member. They are not self-driving like the Disney World counterpart. Basically, the trains do not move unless there's a driver up front. How fast do they go? Well, for outside Disneyland, they can go up to 30 miles per hour, and inside average about 15 miles per hour or slower. When entering the station, they go from 10 to 5 to a full stop or 0 miles per hour. Notice the red blinking light when they come into the station. Once the train lines up with the sensors on the station and the train has lined up properly, the light will go solid red. The pilots must have the train fully stopped when the light comes to a solid red color. I will discuss that stuff more in detail a little bit later. The monorails are also fully electric. They draw their power from the bus bar attached to the side of the rails. It's about 600 volts of electricity, so don't touch that side, you sillies. The trains also have their own smaller batteries that allow communication and other functions inside the train. If the beam loses power, the trains cannot run, but they can still communicate with their passengers due to this battery. It's sort of like batteries on an electric car. There is the power that powers the car and allows it to move, in this case just being the beam, and the battery that powers normal functions like the dashboard, radio, and windows, just as an example. It's worth noting that they can only run 2 trains and not 3, as the Mark 7 models draw on a lot of power, especially when they are going up a hill. The beam cannot support a 3-train operation with this model of train. Now on to capacity. These monorails have 5 cabins each. Each cabin can fit roughly about 15 to 20 passengers for a possible of 75 to 100 passengers per train, depending on availability and demand of course. On paper it's 20, but realistically with strollers and how everyone is different shapes and sizes, it's roughly 15 to 20. The monorails also have 2 other areas, the nose and tail cone, but I will get into those in just a moment. Each cabin has 4 benches, and each bench can roughly sit 5 people. As you can see, this is the inside of the cabin. It's worth noting which direction the train travels in for those who cannot sit backwards while in motion. So the benches that are facing towards the back of the train aren't best for those prone to that type of motion. You can also see with the amount of space inside, it's why I say it's sort of a small space and becomes even smaller when strollers are added. Also, sometimes cabins may be unavailable for technical or custodial reasons. If this is the case, they will not load those cabins. This shouldn't be an issue for you as the cast members won't open those cabins for general boarding, so nothing to worry about on your end. As mentioned before, each cabin does have its own audio playing throughout your entire journey, so you get to hear some neat things while en route. It would also be kinda awkward sitting in a silent monorail, I guess. Some safety things regarding the monorail is that you cannot stand during your flight. This monorail is not a straight shot like the Disney World counterpart, and does have some slight inclines and sharp turns, especially coming into the park. It's for your safety and the safety of those around you. It also goes without saying, but don't stick anything out the windows either. This includes anything attached to you, as well as things that aren't, like phones or cameras. There are many points where the monorail gets close to trees or buildings, and getting smacked by one of those at a high speed isn't really a nice feeling now, is it? You could also drop loose articles, and that would be the end of those now, wouldn't it? Also, yeah, there are cameras in the cabin, so the cast members can see you and will stop the train if you are standing or doing something else that's, putting in nice terms, stupidly dangerous. The monorails also have a specific cabin for parties that are utilizing wheelchairs or electric scooters. The 4th cabin and the 2nd door on that cabin is where they load into. At each station, there is a ramp where the cast members will place down onto the train so they can transfer easily into the train. The seat in this cabin also goes down, and they place a stopper behind the wheels so they do not roll backwards. Just a quick side note about this is the only cabin where wheelchairs and electric scooters can board, as it's the only one with a door wide enough and the ability for the seat to fold down. They can fit up 3 wheelchairs, 2 through the 2nd cabin door, and 1 folded up through the 1st cabin door. Depending on the size of your electric scooter, they can only fit 1 at a time, especially if it's a rental from the park. Sometimes there are smaller ones, and if that's the case, you can do up to 2, but it might get a little complicated, but don't worry, the cast members can help you out. If you or someone in your party is using one, you and your party will board at gate number 4 at each station. I will be going into detail about each station later in the video, of course. Now let's talk about the nose and tail cones before moving on to the individual stations. The nose and tail cones. The nose and tail cones are another part of the monorail, the nose being where you ride with the pilot, and the tail being where you ride in the very back. At the time of making this video, they currently do not offer riding in either one for the foreseeable future. Prior to the pandemic, the nose and tail cones were other options of riding in the monorail. They can fit up to 4 in the front and 6 in the back, no more than those numbers for safety reasons. These offered a unique experience and were neat for what they were. They are also first come, first serve, and only available upon request. They do not load unless you ask. They also do not offer it all the time, and it's subject to availability. As mentioned earlier, it's still unavailable as of making this, but I will post a pinned comment on the video if and when it becomes available again. For when, and if, they are available, you would ask a cast member if you can ride in them. For the front, you'd make your way to the first gate and ask. And for the back, you'd make your way to gate 5 and ask. Now this is important. If they are available, they will tell you where to wait and when they are ready. They will then open the doors for you. Do not open the doors yourself, or any of them for that matter. You are also allowed to do a round trip up in the front or in the back, but you must exit one coming back to Tomorrowland. That way others waiting for it have a chance to ride in there as well. At the downtown station, it's first come, first serve, and is more than likely not available, as people from Tomorrowland can do the round trip without exiting at the station. Now what would cause them to be unavailable, or in this case still unavailable? Well, when Disneyland reopened on April 30th of 2021 from its long closure because of the pandemic, the 2 attractions that did not reopen were Finding Nemo Submarine Voyage and the Disneyland Monorail. For obvious reasons, you can understand why those 2 did not reopen immediately. Well, after 18 months of being closed, they finally reopened on October 15th of 2021. At the time, and a few months afterwards, masks were required inside the monorails, and you can get why passengers couldn't sit up front with the driver, as they did not want their drivers getting sick. Well, 2 years later, why is it that they're still not loading up there? Well, it's a numerous amount of things, and some are just speculations and are not concrete reasons. The ACA is not properly working in the nose and tail, and if trains were to break down, especially on a hotter day, well, that wouldn't be fun for anyone, especially with no airflow. This could also be for the safety of cast members, as there are still variants of the virus spreading around, as well as other infections like the cold or flu. Also, it could be because of social media, and how social media likes to ruin things for everyone. Imagine if a TikTok video blew up and was like, check out this secret about the Disneyland Monorail. Well, now it's not a secret anymore, now is it? It's worth noting that social media is probably one of the reasons, as during their reopening phase, a ton of vloggers recorded themselves in the tail cone and pointed out the issues with the operation side, as the trains were still having technical issues when it first reopened for guests back in October of 2021. Plus, with live streaming becoming more mainstream, you don't really want an aggressive streamer to harass cast members up front while moving a heavy train full of passengers. That is just speculation, of course. It could also just be that there are more new cast members that were hired in after the reopening from the pandemic, and they never had the experience of having guests up front with them. Another reason is the constant technical issues that sometimes happen to the monorail, and they don't want passengers up front when these technical issues do happen. The last speculation is how guest behavior is now opposed to what it used to be. There are more unruly guests in the park, and just theme parks in that matter, where guests are breaking more safety rules and just overall being unfriendly to everyone. Imagine someone like that sitting up front alone with a cast member for about 10 minutes at a time. That could be a safety issue waiting to happen. Now, of course, I'm not saying that every single guest in the park is out to be a rule-breaking delinquent, but using an extreme example, of course. Most day guests are very polite and don't really cause issues with cast members. There are many speculations and reasons of why the nose and tail cone are not available, but just know it's for safety reasons and not just because they feel like saying no. Now let's finally move on to the stations, starting with the Tomorrowland one. The Tomorrowland Station. As you may remember, this station is located above the Nemo submarines. Well, once you make your way up here, there's a few things to keep in mind. Firstly, depending on the business of the station, it's important to head all the way down to gate number 5 as more passengers may or will be coming into the attraction. As mentioned before, about 15 to 20 passengers per cabin, so that applies to the gates as well. Each gate is indicated by a yellow line and a yellow number on the poles. While you may be at a gate, please be advised you do not have to go to the corresponding cabin, as you may go into a different one, especially if a cast member tells you there's more room at the different end of the train. Secondly, if you have a wheelchair or electric scooter, you will always board through gate number 4 and find yourself in between those two white lines. You also have the option of leaving your wheelchair or electric scooter up on the platform if you are doing a round trip and can transfer out. See the monorail cast members for details. You may also hear a cast member yell 4-2, which indicates that a party utilizing a wheelchair is coming down to the 4th gate and they will board through the 2nd door on that respective cabin. Thirdly, if it's busy, they will cut off how many people can come onto the platform, as they not only have the other station to keep in mind, but there is only so many passengers that can fit into the train. If you do end up coming to the Tomorrowland station and see that there is a rope/chain up, it's because they have already counted the number of passengers they need for the next train, and you'll be on the train after that. So don't hop the chain or drop it. Take turns and wait. It'll all be okay. Fourthly, the cast members are the ones to open the gates. They do not open automatically. They do not open until the platform starts to clear out. Since passengers exit away from the center of the train, the first gates usually open are gates 3 and 4. Then they work their way down to each respective side and open the gates as passengers exit. They cannot just open the gates when there's a flood of people still exiting, as it's uncomfortable and unsafe. It's also worth noting that wheelchairs do get priority boarding at gate number 4, so unloading them or loading them will cause a delay for normal passengers at gates 4 and 5 until the wheelchair ramp is up and put away. Do not try to go through gate 3 and down to cabins 4 and 5 while they are loading your wheelchair, as it's not only rude, but you could also trip over the ramp if it's down. It's just like a train station, but there are gates to keep those safe. So don't go through the exit or open the gates on your own, as a cast member will tell you when it's safe to enter the station and or open the gates for you. The fifth point is that the train cannot just leave the station until the other train has departed the downtown station. They then have 2 small windows when they can send the train and 1 no rush window when they can send it, for a total of 3 times when they can send the train. I will cover this in a bit. So if the train is hanging out in the station and no one else is getting on, the train may be holding until it's safe to leave. If they're operating with 1 train, it can leave the platform whenever it is clear, but as stated earlier, I will go into more detail about that later. Lastly, the Tomorrowland station is the only station where you can do a round trip. You do not have to get off the downtown station if you do not want to, but you must get off when you get back to the Tomorrowland station. This is why the monorail at Disneyland is considered an attraction first and transportation second. Something to keep in mind, this changes 30 minutes prior to park closing, as they only do one-way trips to downtown Disney at that time, but I will get into into that later, of course. This may also happen very seldomly during normal operations, but the cast members will inform you ahead of time before this would happen, if it were to happen, of course. Now let's move on to the Downtown Disney Station. The Downtown Disney Station. As you may remember, this station is located next to the Star Wars Trading Post and right across from the LEGO store. Here's a few things to keep in mind. Firstly, this is considered a second entrance to Disneyland. This is another option for anyone, with a ticket of course, to come into the park, and it drops you right off in Tomorrowland. This is also a good way for hotel guests to come into the park for Magic Morning, when available of course. For normal guests, it opens with the park. Secondly, this station is considered a courtesy stop on the round trip. Guests doing the round trip do not have to get off at this station. So there is a slight possibility that if a train was full and nobody got off, no one at the downtown station would be getting on. The cast members do not have to kick anyone out at the station. Thirdly, this station always opens gate number 1 first, as it's towards the front of the train. I would recommend heading all the way down to this gate to get on quickly. Now, if the station is busy, they will only open up gate number 1. First, they do a seat count, and then, once they have the number of passengers that can fit on the train, as some passengers may have stayed for the round trip, they will let that number in through the first gate and the first gate only. This happens at busier times such as pre and post parade, and about an hour and a half before the fireworks start, especially at this station. It's going to be first come, first serve, and if the line is super long, you may be waiting a while even with 2 trains. It is important to make sure you grab the first available seat when they do one-gate procedures, as any open seats will be gone if you skip over them. Fourthly, once again, those traveling with a wheelchair will come to gate 4 and hang out in the white box. It's important to know that other parties using a wheelchair may do a round trip with their wheelchair and may not exit the downtown station. There is a slight possibility that you may be waiting a little bit, but if that is the case, a cast member should let you know. This is important for guests not using a wheelchair, as gates 4 and 5 will not open right away until they have boarded the train and the wheelchair ramp is put away. It is highly recommended to go to gate 3 and find a spot towards the front 3 cabins. If there is no more room towards the front 3 cabins, they will load towards the back once the wheelchair has loaded or unloaded. Fifthly, this station closes 30 minutes prior to park closing. If for whatever reason you're still coming in the park this late, keep in mind that after you exit the downtown station after this time frame, you will not be allowed to come back in. Those exiting around this time frame, make sure you have everything before leaving, as they do not allow passengers to come back into the park after this time, especially so if the park is closed. For example, the last train that leaves at park closing will not be returning to the Tomorrowland station at all. Last thing to know is that this station can send their train anytime and don't have to wait for the other station. Keep in mind that they cannot send the train until the station is clear of all passengers. This may not always be the case, as sometimes delays happen, but I will get into that in a little bit. Wait times. Let's talk about wait times. On average, this attraction always has a 5-minute wait when it's running with 2 trains and a 15-minute wait when it's running with 1. On average, 2 trains are usually running, but if you see a 15-minute wait or more, there is a high possibility that they are only running 1 train, or it's just busy, especially if you came on a holiday. Wait times aren't exactly posted in front of the attraction like others are. The Tomorrowland station doesn't have a wait time posted at their entrance, and the downtown side has a little sign that the main entrance and cast members are able to change as needed. But please keep in mind that the downtown station may not always be 100% accurate, especially during peak times. There are different types of wait times for different parts of the day for each station. Let's start with the Tomorrowland station. The Tomorrowland station usually has a 5-minute wait throughout the day until post-parade or post-firework times. There may also be a small bump from around lunch and dinner time. You also may be waiting a little bit longer around the 5 p.m.-ish to about 8 p.m.-ish at the Tomorrowland station, as people are trying to leave the park and more people are in the park doing round trips for some reason. This line will also be longer on average when operating the 1 train, regardless of the time. The wait time is non-existent on the Tomorrowland side during the early morning, as who really chooses to ride the monorail as the first attraction of the day, especially on the Tomorrowland side. The wait times may also be longer closer to park closing, as more guests are leaving the park for sure. The downtown side is sort of a toss-up depending on what time you go. If you ride the monorail early in the morning, there will always be a longer wait, as hotel guests and others are coming in this way instead of using the trams. The good part about this is that there's usually never passengers doing a round trip from the Tomorrowland side, so you won't have to worry about a full train coming in around the morning side. Another reason for longer wait times is pre-parade and pre-fireworks, as well as post-lunch and post-dinner times. If you ever see this station is busy, keep in mind that they will most likely be only doing 1 gate, which means scoochy scooch all the way down to gate number 1. The wait times at this station will especially be long if they're only running with 1 train, and at that point, it may be quicker to walk through downtown Disney back to the main entrance. This is roughly a 10-minute walk for those curious. It's highly recommended to check the Disneyland app before embarking to the monorail and know when to come on. The attraction may not be available as well, so that's something good to know before going over. The downtown station will also have a sign saying it's unavailable, and the Tomorrowland station will have cast members blocking the entrance if the attraction is not available. Delays on the Skyway. As mentioned in the Autopia episode, sometimes the trains do have delays that are out of the cast members' control. Sometimes the monorails have delays in their operation due to the other attractions. If Autopia, the railroad, or the Matterhorn must do an evacuation, the monorails must hold until they are clear. This is also very true if someone hops out of their car at Autopia, as there are very low clearances on Autopia that would be unsafe when the train passes by. Another delay is passenger delays. This is why they say to have strollers ready to go before boarding, because trains cannot leave the station until the platform is clear of all passengers. There are some bad eggs that will have main character syndrome and not care about delaying operations, especially when it comes to their stroller. Listen, I understand having your children is tough work at the park, but try to be courteous to those around you when dealing with your stroller. Try to ask if you can stand off to the side behind the gates if you know you can't unfold your stroller quickly, or ask a cast member for help. They are more than willing to help out. If you're also standing in the train and don't sit down when told, the pilots will most likely stop the train until you do sit down. This is unsafe and will delay operations for everyone, so don't do it. This could also be for other passenger related issues that I don't really need to explain in this video, like medical or custodial issues. Delays could also be due to maintenance fixing something on the train, like a door panel or something else. This is usually on the Tomorrowland side, as the maintenance team is closer to the Tomorrowland side than the downtown Disney side. This is also the case for when trains have a temporary technical issue, whether it be on the beam or in the station. If it happens, the train you're in or the other train will hold until it's resolved. They cannot resume normal operations until all technical issues have been resolved, but the temporary ones are very quick and can restart easily from the monorail cast members and not the maintenance cast members. Temporary technical issues are usually automatic emergency stops that stop the train from moving. An example is if the train is moving too fast in an area where the computer says it shouldn't be. Lastly, this could be for safety reasons. The trains will hold until it's clear to send them again. This can include any fire alarms going off on the train's ride path or any backstage vehicles bumping into the beam's pillars. Now let's jump into expected and scheduled downtimes. Expected and scheduled downtimes. The monorails do have downtimes that are planned or expected. The obvious being when adding or removing a train. Sometimes issues happen with the train where it needs to be removed from operations. Those issues will also get resolved and they will be added back onto the main line. It is worth noting that this is when one of the two trains is removed or added back on. If both trains aren't on the beam, then obviously the attraction will be closed. Another reason, which is important to know, is the monorails do close for certain fireworks shows. They close about an hour before the show starts and reopen roughly 30 minutes after it has started. For example, they are usually closed from 8:30 to 10 o'clock p.m. This can change depending on park operations, of course. Certain firework or projection shows have something that flies over the castle. For example, the Wondrous Journeys show has Baymax and the Halloween Screams has Zero. These are directly over the monorail's path near the Matterhorn and shut down for these flyers. At the time of recording this, the monorails do not shut down for Mickey's Mixed Magic and the Believe in Holiday Magic fireworks show, as they do not have any flyers, but this can change in the future as safety rules and regulations are always changing. If you're already in line by the 8:30 closure time, please keep in mind that you will still be allowed to ride, but after the line is gone, everyone must get off as the trains must hold until the show is over. Obviously, sometimes technical issues may happen during this time, and cast members will inform everyone if a temporary closure does happen, if it does. The last expected downtime, and the most important for those visiting during the summertime, is the monorails do go down for excessive heat. The trains do not have AC in the normal cabins. It will not be safe to run during high temperatures. This is especially true if a breakdown were to happen in high temperatures. It's also worth noting that the temperature can be hotter in the cabins due to all the body heat from the passengers, especially if you're in a fully loaded cabin. I do not have an exact temperature, but from my observation, if it's usually around 85 or higher, in Fahrenheit of course, the trains will most likely close. This is especially true when the temperature gets over 90 degrees in Fahrenheit, as it's always 10 degrees Fahrenheit hotter inside the cabins due to all the body heat. Thermodynamics, remember? As the temperatures drop, the monorails can reopen. While it may be cooling off and below the threshold, there are factors why they may not be able to reopen immediately, such as air humidity and other weather patterns that I'm not smart enough to know about. Even when the temperature does go down, they still must retrieve the trains from the maintenance shed, or as they call the monorail shop. They then must take the train out and do some quick testing before reopening, which means it could be up to an hour or more before they do reopen. Now let's talk about actual downtimes. As mentioned before, if 0 trains are out, the attraction cannot run. This is obvious, but I feel like it was important enough to mention it. As mentioned with previous episodes, the monorail is no exception to fire alarms, weather patterns, and or earthquakes. If any of the station's trains or nearby attractions have a fire alarm go off, they must temporarily shut down. They cannot operate during a lightning storm, as big metal boxes plus electricity, not exactly a good combo. Also, while extremely rare in this area, there is a possibility the monorails will shut down except for heavy hail or snowstorms. This could also apply to heavy rainstorms, but not always the case for the monorails. Just know if there is a heavy rainstorm, the park may be closing early than expected. Now, the trains sometimes do have technical issues that are unrecoverable. This could be in the station or out on the beam. These are either issues with the trains or with the beam itself. Sometimes power outages happen to the beam, which could cause the trains to no longer run. If the beam power cannot be restored, the trains will have to be towed. Something that may be neat to see is the monorail tractor. It's a gas-powered tow truck that can tow the monorails if they were to break down. If you ever see this thing out, it means they are working on something on the beam, or they're going to go tow a train if they're not already towing one already. This is usually as a last resort if the trains cannot move anymore due to the technical issues or the power to the beam cannot be turned back on. Downtimes do happen every once in a while, but the ones that cause trains to be towed are few and far between. If aboard a train when this happens, you'll be let out at the Tomorrowland station or the downtown stations respectively. From my knowledge, evacuations from the beam itself are extremely rare and have only happened a small handful of times in its almost 65-year operation. Normal 2-train operation. On average, this is how the monorail runs at Disneyland, running 2 trains at a time and them coming roughly every 5 minutes. They only run 2 trains, not 3 due to demand, as well as the beam not being powerful enough to run 3 trains at once with the current Mark 7s. This is also impractical just because of how many moving pieces there are here sometimes with strollers, wheelchairs, and how guests are opposed to when the Mark 5s are running. This is also because one of the 3 trains is usually under refurbishment. But the main reason worth noting is that they cannot run 3 due to the power limitations of the beam and how the Mark 7s are designed. I have mentioned it before, but there are still others that still believe in this misconception. All the cast members at this attraction have radios, and they use the radios to communicate where the train is by making specific calls on where they're at. This is how they can give an estimate of when the next train is coming. Please keep in mind when talking to a cast member up here, there is chatter going on in their earpiece, so some of them might have a hard time hearing you depending on what is going on. Them having radios is also when they know when to send the trains out, and let's talk about that real quick. The Tomorrowland side has 3 windows when they can dispatch their train. A small window when the other train leaves the downtown station, a small window when the other train enters the park, and when the train makes its 2 honks above the tree line behind the Tomorrowland station itself. The downtown station can dispatch whenever they want, do not have to worry about that small window. Obviously, they cannot send out trains at either station until the platform is clear of passengers. It's also worth noting that sometimes the other train may have to hold in front of the Matterhorn if the train in the Tomorrowland station has not departed yet. They hold it here as the trains cannot get close to each other as it's a safety issue, as well as the computer system in the trains will not let them get any closer. Each train has a system that makes sure the trains do not get close to each other. I will explain this in just a bit. Regardless of how many trains are in operation, the round trip journey is roughly always 12 to 15 minutes. This is always an estimate that they give out, as you see how their loading and unloading process is, especially with wheelchairs sometimes. Now, before we talk about 1 train operation, let's mention on how they send the trains out as well as the trains as well. When the train comes into the station, there is a red light that blinks and the driver slows down until it turns solid red. Once it is solid red and they have parked, of course, the cast member will open the doors allowing everyone to exit out. Now, sometimes the drivers may overshoot their alignment of the station and will have to back up. They will then stop, honk 3 times, and back up until the light has gone solid red again. If they were to overshoot that again going backwards, they would then have to go forward until they get that solid red light. 2 honks for forward direction and 3 honks for reverse direction. After the people have started exiting out, another cast member will let people in, load up the train, and then they will start closing up the doors and make sure the platform is clear. They will then give out an all clear sign and the cast member at the console will give a green light indicating to the driver that it's all clear to go. Once they get that green light, they head out on their way with 2 honks and shooting up to their desired speed. Now, this is a little bit different with 1 train. 1 train operation. Sometimes one of the 2 trains is not available for normal operations and they'll have to run with 1 train only. The only difference, instead of it coming every 5 minutes, is it'll roughly come every 15 minutes now. Now, instead of having to wait for the other station, the train can leave any time when the cast members are ready to send it out. Keep in mind that the wait times will be much longer if they're using 1 train, especially if it's during peak time. Lastly, as a courtesy note, when they are running 1 train and you're doing your round trip, this would be the perfect time to leave your strollers and or wheelchairs if you're able to, of course, so other passengers have more room to get out of the downtown station. Now let's quickly move on to opening and closing procedures. Opening and closing procedures. Starting with opening, the trains are stowed away in the monorail shop and the drivers go back into that area to take them out for daily operations. While doing this and bringing them out into the Tomorrowland station, they make sure everything is working and there are no issues with the trains. It's worth noting that they do this with every attraction in the morning as well. After both trains are out, they cycle the trains around the ride path and test out their system to make sure they do not get close to each other. Each time this happens, the computer and the monorails will automatically stop the train that is getting too close to the other one. If both trains pass this, then they're good to open for the day. If one or both trains fail this, they put the train away or both away. Now, not to worry, as there are fail-safes in case they fail these procedures, and don't worry, as the cast members are trained on this professionally. Now on to closing. As mentioned before, the trains start doing a one-way trip 30 minutes prior to park closing. This is because they're starting to get ready to put the trains away for the night. When the last trains leave for their final trip of the night, they ensure all guests exit at the downtown station and then leave for the monorail shop. Once they get to the tracks, which is near the backstage of Small World, they drive onto the storage beams, putting them away for the night for the maintenance team to work on for the morning pilots to come get when they're ready. Exiting the attraction. Well, now that you know all this neat stuff, let's finally get back to exiting out the attraction. Starting with the Tomorrowland side, as the train comes to a full stop and the doors have opened for you, you'll exit away from the center console. Cabins 1, 2, and 3 towards the front of the train, which is towards the Autopia railroad attractions, and cabins 4 and 5 toward the back, which is towards the Matterhorn attraction. As you exit, try to exit out quickly so other passengers can board, as well as so they can send the train out quickly. Depending on where you are sitting, you'll exit down the ramp or down some stairs with an elevator for those that need it. The Tomorrowland side has 2 exits, one of which combines with the submarine attractions exit. Now try not to go up the exit unless a cast member told you to do so, especially if passengers are exiting out, as it clogs up the walkway. Now the downtown station, everybody exits towards the back of the train. Try to exit quickly and safely as possible, as this train is crucial for the other train's departure. It's also worth noting that you may come back through the downtown station later in the day, if available of course. Just show your park admission tickets to get back in, as it's like exiting the park through the main gates. Well, nothing else to say about this attraction, so let's move on to my final thoughts. Final thoughts. The Disneyland Monorail is a unique transportation type attraction that offers great views of the resort, as well as giving those a quicker way to get in and out of the park. It's good for transportation purposes, when available, and neat to see some of the unique angles of the park. If you're doing a round trip, try to visit when it's not too busy. Thank you for watching this video. This was the last in my mini-series, and I may possibly do a final follow-ups video after this depending on how well these are received. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to share it amongst family and friends. Also, if you want to help support my channel, go check out some of my other content. I really appreciate you all watching, and check out the other episodes in the main series if you haven't already. Thank you, and I'll see you later.